Happy Easter, everyone, and to ones that do not believe, then, well, happy Sunday. So, everyone, it is Sunday, so we all know what that means. It's time for AJ's Weekend Movie Reviews. That's right, we're going to be talking about four very different, very diverse films that we watched in the last 2 days. That being The Host, G.I. Joe Retaliation, Spring Breakers, and Stoker. So, without any further ado, let's get this taken care of, folks. This is AJ's Weekend Movie Reviews, and this is The Host. Since the first trailer, I've been silently defending The Host, particularly when people would quickly dismiss it from being a book written by Stephenie Meyer. Well, I read that book, and it wasn't that bad, but I had faith that it could be adapted into something better, seeing as how the new scribe, as well as director, is Andrew Niccol. You know, the Oscar-nominated writer of The Truman Show, as well as the man behind Gattaca, Lord of War, and the very underrated In Time. Well, I guess even the most talented of people have their bad days. They're really, really, really bad days. The story is of a girl named Melanie, which is Saoirse Ronan. She lives in a future where aliens have taken over most of the humans' bodies, in like an invasion of the body snatchers kind of way. The aliens themselves are so small you can fit them in your hands, and they just slip inside a little slit in the back of your neck. So we open up on Melanie attempting suicide, you know, like you do, as opposed to her body being used as a host for one of the aliens. Her attempt fails, however, and she survives and ends up stuck in the same body as Wanderer. Wanderer can hear Melanie's voice in her head. After Melanie drives Wanderer crazy by throwing multiple hissy fits, Wanderer finally agrees to go find what's left of her family out in the middle of the desert, but they are ruthlessly pursued by the Seeker, the sexy as ever Diane Kruger. Now once there, they are discovered by her rifle-toting uncle, William Hurt, and many others. Though the only other important ones are Jared, which is Max Irons, you know, the son of Jeremy Irons, believe it or not, and Ian, which is Jake Abel, you know, whoever the hell that guy is, and her brother Jamie. Now, of course, we will eventually get to the point where Jared will realize he still loves Melanie, while Ian falls in love with a Wanderer, who they now endearingly call Wanda. And then they'll hang out in a cave for the rest of the movie. It's like Big Brother meets Survivor by way of sci-fi. The setup is actually good enough to really bring out an interesting story with further developments, but we pretty much stay on this surface for over 2 hours. I'll start by saying how one of the main reasons it doesn't work is how unbearable these characters are. How in God's name could any of these characters love each other? They are annoying, whiny, and seem constantly mad at each other despite their love. It doesn't help that these incredibly unappealing characters are brought to life by some very unappealing actors. A lot of the young actors just look like they need a punch to the face. Max Irons clearly doesn't have his father's acting genes, and I hate to get personal, but for a supposed leading love interest, Jake Abel is just a little too creepy looking. Also, if I were Wanda and I had a whiny bitch like Melanie literally stuck in my head, I would just off myself. My God, why would you be so inclined to help her, and how are we supposed to believe anyone would love her? It doesn't help that Oscar nominee Ronan gives the worst performance of her young career so far as both the Wanda and the voice of Melanie. Very disappointing, as numerous people thought her involvement would bring some prestige to this project. Luckily, I was able to distract myself from paying attention for a good 5 minutes when William Hurt's character said something that totally blew my mind. There's a scene that is an absolute phenomenon where they are talking about stories, and his character says, "I always like science fiction." Think about that for a minute. When you live in a world that has aliens that have taken over Earth, and you are basically living the story of invasion of the body snatchers, how can science fiction even exist in this world? Where's the fiction of it? I have seriously never actually heard the word science fiction in a science fiction movie, because it just totally defies all logic. If that is their reality, what the hell do they see as science fiction? I want a movie entirely based on that. I'd much prefer to watch that. There are so many other problems to go along with all the big ones. One that personally aggravated me was how they completely wasted the opportunity of having Frances Fisher in the cast list as Melanie's aunt. Miss Fisher is incredible in Unforgiven, as well as when she played Rose's mother in Titanic. But here, she is there to just stand in the background and scold people and glare. Not to mention, she's a beautiful woman that they have significantly uglified. I suppose I could admit there are some pretty impressive visuals. I particularly like how the Seekers are impossible to miss as they dress entirely in bright white and drive around in blindingly shiny, spotless silver cars. Even their motorcycles are silver, and they can journey through the desert without their vehicles or clothes getting a spot of dirt on them. However, nothing can really save this from being thoroughly unengaging, boring, long, and a lot of time ridiculous. It's particularly annoying when we get the idea of what a scene is going for, but then Wanda has to verbally lay it out all for us anyway, and it's just weird and awkward when it tries to be funny. There are a number of nameless, faceless characters in this cave with them, but they aren't important until they're dead. So we have to feel sad for some reason for these unimportant dead people that don't get a backstory. Even in the book there are so many side characters, and it's impossible to keep track of all of them, but it's still apparently a big deal when they die. They must be avenged, and all that. Even the suspense is horribly manufactured, especially given that the book had no action, and these scenes were clearly added because Nickel actually thought, okay, the story is dull as it is, I might as well make it seem like they almost get caught a few more times. So there it is. When you look at it, what does it say when the guy adapting the book, that he clearly has faith in, thinks the book isn't interesting enough as it is and has to add contrived scenes to make it seem more exciting? Maybe he lost a bet. G.I. Joe Retaliation. As we all know, this movie was set up to be an absolute disaster. It was scheduled to premiere with Magic Mike on June 29th, 2012. There were 3 trailers, multiple TV spots, action figures, the whole lot. However, they decided they wanted to do total reshoots, convert it to 3D, and apparently test screenings didn't like the limited screen time for Channing Tatum. This pushed it to a March 29th, 2013 release date, a usually horrible box office slot. However, this movie is on its way to making quite a bit of money, and wouldn't you know it, it's not even a bad movie. Okay, before I get started, I'll just say that I'm one of the only people I know that kinda like the first movie, G.I. Joe: The Rise of Cobra. I don't know what people expect when they go to an action movie based off a series of popular action figures. I mean, seriously, what did you want? They're fun, the action scenes are very well staged, and there's a lot of humor to set the light mood for everything. This one begins by setting up the relationship between Roadblock, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, in a hardcore G.I. Joe, and Duke, which is Channing Tatum, the hero from the first movie, in a hilarious scene that starts off like the beginning of Zero Dark 30, with a black screen, devastating sounds of combat heard in the darkness, only to be revealed as it's Duke and Roadblock playing video games. After a successful mission, there's an unexpected attack on the Joes, which sadly leads to Duke's demise. It is revealed then the attack was ordered by the president, Jonathan Pryce, who is not actually the president at all, but Zartan, which is Honor Vosloo, in a kind of holographic disguise. The real president is being held hostage by Cobra Commander, who is relieved from his prison by Storm Shadow. I'll go right ahead and say right up front that if the marketing has fooled you into thinking Channing Tatum fans and Bruce Willis fans should flock to this as soon as possible, I'm sorry to tell you that both of them were reduced to practically cameos. Willis shows up once and isn't really useful again until the final showdown, and obviously Tatum doesn't make it out of the first act. However, there's still plenty of stuff in this movie to get a kick out of. The major standout was the awesomely evil performance from Jonathan Pryce when he's the imposter president. Nothing against Arnold Vosloo, but having Zartan stay in disguise for the whole movie was an ingenious move at letting old Pryce have some fun. He's back to say, forget those Pirates movies, I was a Bond villain once. There was also a standout scene where we're introduced to the prison holding Cobra Commander, and we're given a tour by his wily warden, Nigel James, which is Walton Goggins. Goggins has a great time with this role, channeling a more toned-down version of Warden McCluskey from Natural Born Killers. This scene is hilarious as it is cool thanks to Goggins' wonderful slimy performance. This was my favorite scene in the movie. This was a fun, super fast-paced time with exciting action, particularly a scene involving the mountains, that clearly doesn't take itself too seriously, has very corny lines that all add fun to it, and the overly absurd things often called out by the characters themselves, which is great. And it further proves that Dwayne Johnson is the most appealing action star working today. And it probably has the best converted 3D we've seen yet. There's not really much else you need to know about this movie. Go enjoy yourself. Spring Breakers. I'm glad I waited until about 24 hours after I saw it to write the review for this movie. Unless you're incredibly close-minded, I really don't believe this is a movie you can form an instant opinion on the second after it's over. It's full of little details you may or may not notice on a first viewing, and it has a hidden agenda from what is advertised to be that it needs time to really think over. I'm not the least bit surprised a lot of people who go in wanting to see a tits and ass movie coming out saying things like, "Worst movie ever," or "What did I just watch?" Though, I can't help but find it absolutely hilarious that those people leave the theater unsatisfied when the movie gives them exactly what they want, just with some substance. Guess that's just a little too much for some people. The plot is very simple. In fact, the plot is so simple, I imagine they could have made the movie 2 minutes long, covered every story arc with some time to spare. This is one of those special movies where it's all about the execution, and writer-director Harmony Korine knew exactly how to execute it. The story involves teen girls Faith, Candy, Britt, and Cotty, which is Selena Gomez, Vanessa Hudgens, Ashley Benson, and Rachel Kareem, who are very upset because their lives at school are so very boring and redundant, and none of them have the money to go to beach for spring break. In a lack of good judgment, Britt and Candy get the idea to rob a restaurant with a fake gun and a hammer to get the money. With Cotty driving the getaway car, they do just that. They grab the hesitant church-going Faith and head off for spring break, where they party and do every kind of bad thing you can think of. The thing is, as weird as it is to say, the party scenes reminded me of an episode of SpongeBob. Remember the episode where Squidward moved away to Squidville, where everyone looked and acted just like him? And he thought it was the greatest thing ever! And then he started to do all the same things day in and day out, but he got progressively tired of the redundancy of it all? I could be wrong, but I feel that's what we're supposed to feel with all these party scenes. After a while, heavy partying is not enough for these girls. They crave more. When they're all arrested for being busted with alcohol, coke, etc., they catch the attention of wannabe gangster rapper Alien, cornrowed, gold-toothed, speech-slurring James Franco. Alien introduced them to his world where he has everything and all the money any of them could ever want. That is, except for the skeptical Faith, who leaves the movie surprisingly early when she doesn't fall under Alien's spell and has had enough. However, with Britt, Candy, and Cotty still under his wing, he showers them with all the bright, shiny objects all his money can buy, and they will pretty much do anything and everything he wants them to do. This is including some criminal dirty work that eventually gets the unwanted attention of his former best friend turned enemy, Archie, played by Gucci Mane. This movie has a lot to say, depending on your perception of it. I've seen numerous theories on numerous scenes, and they all make sense to how the viewer wants to see it. Korine is very generous to the viewer in giving us something that creates a virtual orgasm for the eyes, as well as letting us take control of the film's meanings. You could see it as just a well-photographed crime movie that is short on story. Some people see it as an anti-partying movie. Some see it as a pro-partying movie about living life to the fullest. Some even believe it's a statement on the rise and fall of Britney Spears, whose music is quite prominent in a few scenes, particularly in now infamous montage of the troubled alien and how they get into trouble with the girls into the sounds of him playing every time on his piano. The performances, they're all outstanding. Gomez is very good as both the conscience and concern of the group. Director Karine's wife, Rachel, plays both sides of innocent and wild, believably. The standouts, however, Hudgens and especially Benson, as the ones who clearly have some psychotic tendencies they really need to get out of their system. They are the ones that really fall under Alien's spell, and sometimes even overpower him. In a scene you'll have to see to believe. Hudgens is genuinely unnerving, and Benson, incredibly scary and intimidating as the craziest of them all. However, the best of the cast, and pretty much the main reason to see this movie, is Franco. James Franco is nowhere to be found when you look at Alien, who is the most layered wannabe gangster you'll probably ever see on film. He tries to be tough when we know he's weak. He tries to be hardened when we know he's soft-hearted. He tries to be fearless when we know he's frightened. He is an incredibly complex character that Franco flawlessly and effortlessly brings to life. The best thing about this movie is whether you love it or hate it. I don't really think there's an in-between here. It is the kind of movie that will etch itself deeply in your brain and you won't be able to get it out of your head, forcing you to confront your emotions about it. I think that speaks volumes for a movie that most people brush off as girls in bikinis that live life like there's no tomorrow. Spring break forever. Stoker. I've been excited to see Stoker for well over a year now. A gothic horror thriller from the director of the original Oldboy starring Nicole Kidman, my favorite actress in the world, with a plot that mirrors my favorite Alfred Hitchcock movie, Shadow of a Doubt? Hell yes! I am so happy to report that after seeing it, it might even be better than I thought it would be. The story is that of India Stoker, which is Mia Wasikowska, whose father, Dermot Mulroney, has just died. Now, shortly after his funeral, she lays eyes for the first time on her estranged Uncle Charlie, Matthew Goode, who mysteriously shows up after all these years. Things getting indescribably wild and out of control when India notices a sexual tension between Uncle Charlie and her unhinged mother, which is Kidman. I feel to keep the surprises coming, I shall stop my synopsis there. Let's talk about the cast. I have to admit, I was very skeptical about Mia Wasikowska being the star of a movie I had so much hope for. I had never really liked her as an actress, find her completely abysmal in the likes of Alice in Wonderland, Jane Eyre, and Lawless. But here, she really delivers in an effective, chilling performance. Not to mention offering us one unforgettably bizarre masturbation scene. Kidman is her usual perfect self as the complex mother character, who may or may not have some hidden craziness behind her. I feel Matthew Goode has an unfair disadvantage when being critiqued here, because he's quite good. There's actually some hints of brilliance in his performance. I can't complain. He brought an authentic creepiness and enough charm to where you aren't quite sure if he's what he seems or not. Of course, the damper on this is that the thought that Colin Firth was originally cast in this role before he had to bow out at the last minute and replaced by a single man co-star Goode. Where Goode was strong and effective, I think Firth would have been unfathomably remarkable, but as I said, I have no complaints. Well, just a couple, but they're really easy to get over. The main one is while first-time screenwriter Wentworth Miller, star of Prison Break, has a good story going with many genuinely surprising twists and turnings and twists at every corner, some of his writing still comes off as quite amateurish. This is blatantly obvious in the generic bully character that harasses Indy at school, as well as the character of Whip, which is beautiful creature's Alden Ehrenreich, whose character goes through a drastic change fairly quickly. However, there's way too much going on in this movie to notice a few flaws with everything to love. There are numerous unforgettable scenes, starting with a wonderfully executed scene where we get to see how India has grown up by showing every pair of the same shoes she has gotten for her birthday every year, and how they get smaller as the years go back. There's also an interesting scene where, after much persuasion, India and Charlie finally have a duet at the piano. The way they play is so intimate, and they progressively speed up as the song intensifies. When they finally finish, India is out of breath and looks as if she's been violated. And this is we realize right here that Charlie has such a deceptive charm, he was able to fully have his way with her by just playing the piano. Another thing I particularly love was the undefined time. Despite the fact that every now and then a cell phone pops up, or when Kidman appears to be having an iPod, everything else in this movie, from the set design of the house to the clothes they wear, appears to be from a completely different time in history. Like the characters are stuck in a past era and they can't get out. If ever there was a movie that can really effectively give you its atmosphere, it's clear this movie is under the control of an incredible creative force that really knows what they're doing. This movie is so spectacularly jarring, morbid, and uncomfortable that it's actually quite exhilarating. Director Chan-wook Park uses style and photography in amazing ways you've never seen before to weave this story like one beautiful, scary as hell quilt. That be AJ's Weekend Movie Reviews for this week. And if you like these, leave a comment, say you did. And if not, then there's always that. But hopefully you enjoyed this look into the movies for this week. Next week, we're going to be talking, like I said, Evil Dead, Room 237, and Temptation, Confessions of a Marriage Counselor. So, with that being said, keep watching, do subscribe if you like, and until tomorrow, when we talk Celebrity Apprentice, that's all I gotta say about that.